Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Greetings to my 400 affiliates across the planet and everyone listening on HughHewitt.com or Town Hall TV. You can watch, of course, at both places. Wow, what a week. We meet on April 24th in the year of the plague 2020. The United States has suffered 49,887 deaths as of the last official toll. It's no doubt over 50,000 by this morning. The world, 2,660,000 deaths, 2,660,000 cases, 176,000 deaths. These are all because of the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP. Never forget that. The scourge of the world, the suffering of the world, the deaths of your loved ones, the illness of your loved ones, all because of the CCP. And it will ever be so. Mike Pompeo explained it yesterday at great length. Good for the Secretary of State. I hope he keeps doing it. Congress passed $484 billion more of relief yesterday, but jobless claims have skyrocketed. A New York study suggests that 1/5 of the city has already had the virus, exposed to it. That also suggests a much lower death rate than we had thought. Stockholm is now at 25% exposure. They chose to go with the herd immunity rack. There are earlier deaths in the United States than had previously been imagined. I talked with a young man yesterday who was just deathly ill in January in the district in D.C. Couldn't get out of bed for 4 days. And beginning to think, did China actually hide this from the world much longer than when we suspected they did beginning in December? Did they hide it in November? Goodness knows what would have happened to this country if President Trump had not stopped flights from China in January. All we did was buy time to make mistakes and add capacity, which was going to happen at the beginning of any crisis. I'll be talking with Dr. Larry Arnn about that today. A battle looms in Congress over relief for struggling states. I will have a new Washington Post op-ed out on that. Any relief for the states, as Leader McConnell said on the show this week, has need to be tied to reforms in the states that are profligate. It can't be just, oh, you're a state, we'll give you money, you're a state, we'll give you money. No, some states are well-run. Other states are corrupt, sometimes criminally so in the case of Illinois. Some states are completely reckless, like Connecticut. That column will go up at the Washington Post a little bit later today. I want to remind you all that it's been a big news week here at the Hugh Hewitt Show. Between the interviews with Attorney General William Barr and the interview with Leader McConnell and John Thune, you need to go and check all of my offerings at my YouTube channel if you want to listen to those interviews. The Bill Barr interviews for the books, for history. The Mitch McConnell interview is the beginning of a long, drawn-out debate that will be very, very vital to the future of the United States. They're both at YouTube. You can also follow my Instagram account, my Facebook account. You can do all of these things, and Mike Pompeo's interview from last Friday about the WHO is there as well. This is where we make news. We just don't report news. But I do want to tell you what is not news. The president did not call for injecting people with bleach yesterday. I saw, as a start, what Jedrick Wills, by the way, welcome to Cleveland, Jed. The Browns got their nasty left tackle. Nasty being good in this case. You want your left tackle to be Joe Thomas, nice outside of the yard lines, and Joe Thomas nasty inside of it. And Jed Wills, as they call him, I guess he's called Jed, is the man. The Browns got to draft their choice of 3 tackles. There were 4 great O-linemen last night. One was Andrew Thomas, who was top of my board, but I don't know anything about offensive linemen. I just liked the way he talked. He went to the Giants, poor guy, but he'll have a great career there for it. And then it fell exactly as the Browns needed it, and Jedrick Wills went at number 10 to the Cleveland Browns. I'm just so happy. He is, and that means they thought he was better than Becton and Wirfs, who are great young men up too, and they went very quickly soon thereafter. But it was just a terrific night. But as I was watching, I was in draft mode last night. I put away the cares of the world. Did not talk to any of the family except by text here or there. We were debating which one to take with my Browns extended family. And I was congratulating Urban Meyer. I mean, what a football factor Ohio State is. What, they have 3 first-rounders yesterday. They have the most first-round draft choices in all of NFL history from the Ohio State University. And what a tribute to Coach Urban Meyer. I mean, he must be just dizzy with pride for the young man he recruited, inspired, coached, and put on a great life path. They're all great young men. But throughout that whole night, I watched a member of the elite media trash Trump, trash the president for saying something he didn't say. He did not say inject yourself with disinfectant, inject yourself with bleach. I watched it. He was extolling the Department of Homeland Security's study that ultraviolet rays get rid of the virus. And talking out loud, how can we get those rays onto people? Can they help people? Is there some way? Thinking like a layman, thinking out loud. And of course, the White House press corps is basically Joe Biden's advance team. Not all of it. 3/4 of it could just as well get a check from Joe Biden. And then 95% of the Beltway media is Joe Biden's advance team. And I got Marc Lotter coming on. I just got Marc Lotter coming on later. I'm going to ask him, does it make sense for the president to meet with Joe Biden's advance team every day? And so I watched that unfold, and I thought to myself, this country, Bill Barr, in his interview with me this week, warned that a danger to the republic come, not just from the virus, but from a monolithic, ideologically unbalanced press. And that's what we have in the United States now. They are frothing, and they're not very smart. They are intentionally dumb. Now, the president tried to set up upbeat tone. Cut number 8. This is Donald Trump at the presser yesterday.
Later this evening, we expect the House to pass Paycheck Protection Program and Health Care Enhancement Act. I'm grateful that Congress is answering my call to deliver these additional $320 billion in relief for the American worker and for small businesses. At a time when many Americans are enduring significant economic challenges, this bill will help small businesses to keep millions of workers on the payroll. You see, states are starting to open up now, and it's very exciting to see. I think it's very awe-inspiring. We're coming out of it, and we're coming out of it well. And I'm very happy the governors really have been doing a really good job working with us, and it's really pretty impressive to see. I've spoken to numerous leaders of countries over the last 48 hours, and they are saying we're leading the way. We're really leading the way in so many different ways.
We are leading the way, and we're doing a great job. And 50,000 Americans have died, so it is not a time of joy, but it is a time of resolve. Later in the day, I'm going to be talking with Dr. Larry Arnn, Churchill biographer extraordinaire, president of Hillsdale College, about leading in a crisis. Sometimes you end up in a war you don't want, but it's all the CCP's fault. And they have now opened an active disinformation campaign to blame us. I mean, just the weirdest conspiracy theories when it came out of a lab in Wuhan, and people need to know that. London this morning announced they are furloughing 7,000 government employees on the transportation system. That's going to happen in every country. It's going to happen in every state because there are no revenues. There are no passengers. We also find that German businesses have suffered an extraordinary collapse in confidence, which is not unusual. Just the canary in the mine. We'll find that everywhere. The global death toll passing 175,000. It's going to double and double again as it comes around. Russia reported a record number of daily deaths on Friday. 6,000 new cases, 60 deaths. Just getting started there. Other good news, Boris Johnson going back to work next week. And President Trump got in a shot at Joe Biden. Cut number 17.
Yes, thank you. Looking forward to November, the election. Given the risk that the flu and the coronavirus there could be a problem. Do you think there is a risk that there will be lack of agreement, lack of legitimacy to the results in a very close election, and people start saying, well, a whole bunch of people couldn't go and vote because they were scared?
I can't tell you what's going to happen in an election. Yeah, great question. I can't tell you what's going to happen. We have a sleepy guy in a basement of a house that the press is giving a free pass to, who doesn't want to do debates because of COVID, and lots of things are happening, right? And I watched a couple of interviews, and I say, oh, I look forward to this. But they're keeping him sheltered because of the coronavirus.
Yeah, you know what he's saying? He's saying Joe Biden does not have the energy to run for president. I agree with him. Good chance he won't be the nominee. Good chance American people are not going to want to change horses in midstream, especially if we're on the upside. A market report when we come back. I'll check during the break. You are listening. Don't forget Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. It's Friday, April the 24th in the year of the plague, 2020. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Thank you for listening to the show. We have made a lot of news this week, and I don't like to brag much, but the reason is I prepare, and my guests are given time to answer, and I'm not trying to make headlines, so I make headlines. I'm trying to get answers to important questions. Most of the media has descended into this chaos of getting Trump. And it's just like it's a mob. And I try to stay far above that and bring you news that you can use, analysis that you need. I'm not always right. I wish I'd been right about Bernie or Kamala Harris and wrong about the virus, but it was the other way around. I finished dead last in the Washington Post prediction poll because I never thought Joe Biden would get nominated. I just didn't. Always ranked him last. And so I just don't understand Democrats. But I think Kamala Harris is going to be on the ticket. Now, I tell you I finished dead last in predicting Democratic nominees because never take investment advice from me, but do take data from me. I'll give you the facts. And this pre-market report, this market report, this business story of the day is brought to you by Birch Gold Group. And Mitch McConnell said on the show this week that he's worried about the national debt. Well, he should be. It went past $24 trillion, and everybody knows eventually, the speed of money picks up. It accelerates. It's a term of art, and inflation comes. And when it comes, you'll want some gold in your portfolio. Gold is up this morning to $1,753. When I first started telling you about Birch Gold, it was in the 1400s. I don't know where it's going. I am not a prophet nor the son of a prophet, but I believe in diversification of your portfolio. I bought gold in December. The only stock I own is Amazon. I have mutual funds and bonds, and that's how I prepare for my eventual retirement. I just signed an 8-year extension with Salem, so I'm not retiring anytime soon. I'm going to be there for the Browns Super Bowl run when we catch the Patriots. But I want you to get informed about gold. I want you to text Hugh, H-U-G-H, to 474747, and Birch Gold Group will send you the information. You can also go to hughgold.com. They're very reputable, very highly regarded, very cautious. They don't let you overinvest. What they do for you is what they did for me. They deliver. All right? So if you want to buy actual physical gold to put away in a safety deposit box, they can do that. If you want to diversify a part of your IRA into a actual physical precious metals, gold and silver, they can do that. You just text my name, Hugh, to 474747. Yesterday, the Dow had a big gain going, and then the WHO, incompetent sons of guns that they are, leaked a partial study about Gilead's drug that tanked that stock in the market, but then it recovered, and the Dow was up 40 points by the end of the day. The NASDAQ was off 1, and the S&P down 2. This morning, everything looks good. Abroad, it's been a little bit red. The 10-year Treasury is down again to 0.61%, but Amazon looks to have another great day ahead. They're on a march. They're $2,400 a share. They are themselves a diversified. They're going to benefit in the cloud. I own Amazon stock, so discounted for that. But I just think they're going to be winners and vast losers in this disintermediation of consumer patterns. And one of the things you can count on is gold. That's what you can count on. Text my name, Hugh, to 474747. Also want to remind you, no safe spaces. NoSafeSpaces.com for your weekend viewing. The code for a great discount is SALE25. SALE25. You can also go to patternsofevidence.com if you want a little biblical literacy on the Exodus. You'll find there Eric McTaxis and Dennis Prager and Gretchen Carlson, patternsofevidence.com. I want to thank all of our sponsors for sticking with us in a tough time for the advertising business. There are amazing Sierra Pacific Mortgage, andrewandtodd.com, andrewandtodd.com. Birch Gold Group, I just told you about. LifeLock, Relief Factor, honorboundcoffee.com. Harry's, best razor in the world, best shave I've ever had. Policy Genius. Many of you are thinking seriously about life insurance now, and Policy Genius will help you. The Job Creators Network. MyPillow.com. God bless Mike Lindell. They're still giving him hell online for being a man of God when he was called to the White House. MyPillow.com. Just use my name, Hugh. You'll get the best price on anything you want to order. And come right back. Sonny Bunch will provide us with some ideas for the weekend's viewing. Dwayne and I are supposed to be in France, but lots of people have far worse problems than not going to France. Sonny Bunch will help us solve the problem of what, if anything, to watch this weekend. I'm watching the draft because the Browns are just killing it, so I'll be watching the draft. Welcome, Jed Wills. I'll be right back on. Welcome back, America. 33 minutes after the hour. Dwayne and I were supposed to be in Paris today. Instead, we're talking with Sonny Bunch. And I know many of you have much greater difficulties in your life than
Sacre
not being in
bleu.
Paris. Sacre bleu. We're not there, but we're talking to Sonny. That's quite a trade. That's called trading down in the draft. Good morning, Sonny Bunch.
Hugh, what were you going to be doing in Paris?
We were going to go on a boat cruise from Paris to Normandy and tour the beaches of Omaha and Utah Beach and visit the national cemeteries and then return after a dinner at Versailles to spend a few nights in the City of Lights. We'll talk about what you want to talk about, but we're not going to do it.
A prequel of sorts. It's, how little puppy Scooby-Doo met little kid Shaggy, and every kid's movie property will be put on VOD directly instead of going into theaters. So
Now, Sonny Bunch, there's a Groundhog's Day quality to this, and talking about Trolls World Tour and Scoob is not really Rebeller Media strike zone area, right? You're cutting the corner. This is definitely not Rebeller Media strike zone. This is a business section more than anything else. So I am curious if these publicly traded companies that produce these films, like Sony and Disney, have to tell us how they're doing, because I'm curious how they're doing.
Well, they do in a very general sense whenever earnings reports come out, right? They have to say how much they have made and how much they have lost, kind of. I mean, the thing about Warner Brothers, right, is that Warner Brothers is now a part of the AT&T empire. So there are all sorts of ways that you can hide profit and loss within a company that large. The studios don't actually have to. They are not legally required to release their box office receipts. They're legally required to release accurate box office receipts if they're going to release them, because they are publicly traded companies and because they are there is a profit and loss and stock material. There's a material reason not to lie about this sort of thing.
Right, and that's why I think there's also a material reason to let us know if VOD is in essence burning up assets that would be better saved for a rainy day come next year when the virus isn't an issue, God willing. And so I think it's fascinating. You're talking about a disintermediation of an entire industry, and thus far, has anyone taken a big swing on a big pick on VOD?
No. I mean, I would say everything that is coming out on VOD is stuff that would have been, at the very least, a modest box office hit when it hit theaters. So I mean, if you look
aren't you surprised by that?
No, I'm not surprised by it in the sense that, look, if I'm not surprised by it in the sense that it would be extremely difficult to make enough money to pay for a lot of really big tentpole type features, right? So let's look at a movie like Mulan, right? Mulan was supposed to be out by now.
Yes.
It's a live action. It's a big live action Disney movie, a reboot. It's a remake of one of their cartoons. These do extremely well at the box office. Aladdin grossed $800-900 million, something like that. Lion King grossed, I think, $1.3 billion or something like that. These movies do extremely well at the box office. They do extremely well at the box office here. They do extremely well at the box office abroad. They are huge cash cows. And they're not cheap to make. I mean, I think Mulan probably costs in the $150 to $200 million range. So it's not a cheap movie to make. They're not cheap movies to market. And when you put it out on VOD, you spend a little bit less on marketing. But still, the simple fact of the matter is, Disney looks at a movie like Mulan and says, okay, this is a movie that between the United States and China alone should probably gross us in the $600 million range.
Right.
And if you put a movie like that out on VOD, there's no way for it to gross $600 million. And again, that's just USA and China. Worldwide, that's a movie that is probably going to gross $900 million to $1 billion. It's going to be an enormous hit. And if you look at what Universal did on Trolls, the high-end estimates suggest that they did about $80 million in 10 days, which is a lot of money. Undoubtedly, it's not bad for a movie like Trolls World Tour. But even if Disney doubled that number total, if they did 160, let's bump it up to 200 million. That is a huge profit that they are just giving up. So
Sonny, take me down the business road a little bit. Netflix announced this week 15 million new subscribers, 15.7 million new subscribers, but they guided their future earnings down because they think they've reached the max. Amazon will announce next week, and since they're not just Amazon Prime, I own Amazon. I always disclose that. I buy it because it's a diversified industry within itself. They will have other ways to grow. Has Netflix now reached its outer limit? Do they have something to release right now to bring new subscribers in? Because they've got to have a strategy to keep the growth going.
Well, if I remember correctly, Netflix also announced that they're raising another $1 billion in debt so they can buy more things to get people to come to Netflix. Netflix has always had a slightly weird problem in that it is the obvious market leader. It has the most subscriptions worldwide. It is a hugely dominant force in this field. Except they have to keep making things to keep those people on board, right? So, like, it's not just Netflix with its massive library of originals. It's Netflix that produces a whole new series of a TV show every week, right? That produces a whole new movie every 2 weeks. So they are spending more money than they are bringing in, and they have always spent more money than they brought in, and it is unsustainable in that sense. Have they reached the max? I mean, I guess, except for the fact that they thought they were only going to bring in 7 million subscribers in this last quarter, and instead they brought in 15.6. Now, granted,
as the virus spreads around the world, people have to watch. So, give us a quick. What can we watch, Sonny? What can we watch?
Speaking of Netflix, there's a new movie on Netflix called Extraction, starring Chris Hemsworth. It's produced by the Russo brothers, who are the guys who made the Avengers movie for Marvel, Avengers movies for Marvel, the last few Avengers movies, it is good but brutal. It's a hard movie to watch in the sense that it is very violent. Chris Hemsworth is charming as always, as he's trying to save a child from a war zone. Blah blah blah. It's an action movie. It's a relatively big budget as far as a essentially made for TV movie. Big budget action sequence, spectacular type movie. Which again, this is like it's an interesting question here because this is the sort of movie that probably wouldn't do particularly well in theaters. It's not based on any other property. It's not going to be a huge box office draw for Netflix or for whoever, but it's a Netflix movie that will get people sitting down and watching Netflix this weekend. It's got a big star. It's got a good, decent, high quality prestige.
Did you watch it yet? Have you watched it?
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine here. I can't give it a ringing, rousing endorsement. Like I said, it is kind of violent. But it's also very well shot, and it's very entertaining. I liked it fine. One other quick recommendation, not on Netflix, but on Hulu again. Mrs. America, the Phyllis Schlafly series.
I've been told it's just absolutely a hatchet job on Phyllis Schlafly. I've got to watch it because I'm told it's just a wretched hatchet job.
I have heard conservatives say this, and maybe I just
because Mrs. Schlafly, her husband is a wonderful guy. That's what I heard. I didn't know him, but I've heard from people that he was a wonderful man, and he's portrayed as an evil man, which I always think is the worst thing.
First off, that is absolutely not how he is portrayed here. There's one scene where he wants to have familial relations, and she is kind of like, I'm tired, and they go ahead and but I would say the suggestion that he is portrayed as evil here is ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. He's portrayed as more or less supportive of what she wants to do, and is kind of a man of his time. I would be interested to get your take on it, Hugh, because it is.
I'm going to watch it because I've been asked to by Shafley defenders. I wasn't going to watch it because, like Nixon movies, they never get it right. But I'll watch it, and then we can talk about it next week. That's
Sounds
a
good.
good compromise. All right. Hey, Sonny Bunch, thank you. Follow Sonny on Twitter at Sonny Bunch. Follow Rebeller Media at rebellermedia.com. You can get special deals over there, I think, if you use my name. Maybe. I don't know. But I know you get a special deal if you take relieffactor.com. You get relief from the minor aches and pains that plague exercise and aging. You're definitely doing the latter. You should be doing the former. I am doing the former. Barbara, hurry. Lukewarm coffee, Icarian, curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. And that's what makes the world go round. Some of you take like 35 different supplements. That's fine too. I just take those 4. And it's the only ones I take, and it works for me. And I'm 18 miles this week. I'm slowing down this week. I did 2 big weeks in a row, so you take a slower week. I'll do 25, probably do 7 tomorrow. But I tell you, if you're going crazy inside, you got to get out. Talked about this yesterday with some friends across the country. You got to get out and walk at least an hour a day, maybe 2, or you can get on your little mini scooter like Dwayne does and go tooting around like the Disney kids rides. That's fine. But whatever you do, you got to move the system. Relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. Dwayne, does the scooter give you any aches and pains?
You know, the last time I checked, scooters do actually not have pedals on them.
Oh, so you're pretending those pedals are exercise? Okay, well, we'll be right back with Tarzana Joe. Go to relieffactor.com. And don't forget honorboundcoffee.com as well. Make every cup of coffee help the military families of America. Stay tuned. Joined now by Tarzana Joe, the poet laureate of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Whether it is a season of great disease and despair or Christmas, Joe is always here with the appropriate verse. Hello, Joe.
Hello, Hugh. Well, this week's poem is a little more serious than usual, but there is some good news at the end, so hang in there, okay?
All right.
I know a loving woman, and she loves her loving man. Then cancer came between them, as only cancer can. On heaven's grace and blessing, they have a strong reliance, but here on terra firma, they put their faith in science. A chemo course was ordered to offer up resistance, but starting it has been postponed because of social distance. My wife's friend has a sister whose heart was compromised. A valve needed replacement. A procedure was advised. They followed all the protocols, and surgery was planned until the science told them that her surgery was banned. It seemed that they would have to wait until the shutdown cease. Alas, it's with a heavy heart I say she rests in peace. The oaths that all physicians take is first to do no harm. I know I'm not the only one to raise a loud alarm, but governors must understand their calls are consequential each time that they determine which people are essential. Consider in the policies you're righteously pursuing the quiet repercussions of the damage that you're doing. All of life is precious, and all men are our brothers. Don't tell me some afflicted are more valuable than others. Now, I started writing that poem on Wednesday morning. By Wednesday evening, the governor of California had announced that he was going to permit, thank you so much, what they call elective surgeries. I'm sure there's going to be 10 days of paperwork to figure out which are allowed, but we do have to keep pressing our governors, wherever we live, that health care is a right, isn't it?
I'm so sorry to hear about the heart patient.
Yeah.
I'm sure that is not unique, but it is every loss is unique in its grief, but I'm sure that's not unique in its occurrence.
No, and yours truly needs a heart procedure, which has been postponed. So say a few prayers for me.
You want me to drop by?
Thank you.
Okay, Joe, keep writing, my friend. Keep writing. We need these poems over at tarzanajoe.com. And if you need a bit of poetry commission, I think he's the only one who can absolutely continue in quarantine what he's been doing forever, because I don't think you've ever really written in a coffee house, have you, Joe?
No, not at all. Well, I used to write on the veranda of the place where I worked, but they took unkindly to that as I was pace around and say things out loud, and they'd say, go get a cup of coffee and do that someplace else.
You can do it in your backyard. Tarzana Joe at Reagan.com for all your poetry needs. Good luck to everyone in the Tarzana Joe universe on the medical side, Joe. Thank you. I want to go. Thank you, Joe. I want to go and play something that Brett Baer of Fox News said yesterday about the $484 billion package that was signed by the president last night, supplementing its CARES 2.0. Mitch McConnell put together the first one. He got the second one through. It was held up for 2 weeks by Nancy Pelosi, and millions of people went on the unemployment rolls in the meantime because their businesses couldn't keep them. And Brett Baer was just blunt. Cut number 7.
Let's just set the
Brett
record
Baer,
straight
you take
here.
it away.
I mean, there was a clean bill that once they found out that the small business pot was going to be dry, there was a clean bill to put more money in it. Nancy Pelosi did not go forward with that. Period. The end. Stop there. So, yes, they wanted to do other things. Democrats did. But to have an answer that says that it was Mitch McConnell who delayed is really political jiu-jitsu. And you have to have somebody that pushes back and says, wait a second. In that time that there was a delay, there are X number of small businesses around the country that had to make the decision. I haven't gotten the money, so I've got to let these people go. So when the number goes up 4.4 million on unemployment, there's a reason that it goes up that way. And that delay is part of it.
Of course it was. Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer got people fired. It's that simple. Mitch McConnell would not give in to their throw money at the states. And Andrew Cuomo's mad at Mitch McConnell, and Governor Murphy of New Jersey's mad at Mitch McConnell. I expect every state government that is badly managed, and New York is terribly managed, as I explained in my Washington Post column, which is at the landing page of Washington Post right now. Leader McConnell is absolutely right. I have the key metric in that column, by the way. The key metric. How many government employees per 10,000 people in population? All right, if you go to WashingtonPost.com and you scroll down, you're going to see McConnell wants rescue and relief to be accompanied by reform. He's right, by Hugh Hewitt. And I know all the trolls will come out, but just ask yourself, how many people? Okay, California state and local government employs 883,000 people. Texas, 563,000 people. Now, that's not as bad as it sounds because California's got 40 million people and Texas has 30 million people. But guess what? New York has 20 million people and they have 623,000 employees. So how do you compare the states and whether or not they're overpopulated with government employees? Use the metric of public employees per 10,000 people in population. California has 228 public employees for every 10,000 people. Texas has 209, better than California, but not all that different. New York has a whopping 316 government workers for every 10,000 people living in the state. 316 versus Texas's 209. And you're telling me that Texas and New York should get aid on the same basis? I don't think so. Andrew Cuomo, take your fake math away and take it with the fake news. Mitch McConnell is right. The leader is right. The column is over at WashingtonPost.com. Come back here, hour number 2 of the Friday edition of Hugh Hewitt Show, straight ahead. Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Greetings to the 400 affiliates listening on terrestrial radio and all of you listening online at hughhewitt.com via my YouTube channel, on Instagram, on Facebook. We are everywhere. It occurred to me last night in the second month of the plague. It is Friday, April 24th, year of the plague 2020. America's passed 50,000 dead by now, 49,887 victims that we know of. And it is increasingly clear the virus arrived here earlier than we thought. It is increasingly clear that the Chinese Communist Party owes the world reparations. It is increasingly clear a lot of people who were sick in January were sick with the virus and did not know it. Many deaths unaccounted for. It may have gotten here in December. And we will find out. Epidemiology will be able to find out. Public health authorities will be able to find out, like they traced the 1918 Spanish flu 100 years later, or almost 100 years later in John Barry's book, The Great Influenza. Historians will look back and they will say the most consequential decision was Donald Trump's to stop inbound traffic from China. It bought America a little time in which to make mistakes, time in which to increase hospital capacity, time in which to get together a plan and a task force. And he's done very, very well. Very, very well. And that he meets every day with Joe Biden's advance team in the White House press room, I don't know why he does, but he does. It occurred to me last night, watching the draft, why I make so much news. Does that sound like a non sequitur to you? Why was my interview last week with Mike Pompeo everywhere? Last week, a week ago today. Why was my interview with Attorney General William Barr on every news station this week? Why was my interview with Leader Mitch McConnell in every newspaper and on the lips of every governor and on every story? Why did that happen? Why do I make news and television anchors do not? They have far more resources. I mean, I have the best producer in the business in Generalissimo when he comes in, which isn't often. And I have a great senior engineer in Adam. And Gentle Ben is effective in pushing out the news. But why do I make so much news and nobody else does? For the same reason that the NFL draft was so clunky last night. Are you putting this together? Jedrick Wills, yes, the Browns got their man. That's great. But it was just awful television. It was terrible to watch. It was horrific. Roger Goodell is never exciting, and he's particularly not exciting when you don't have the fans booing him. They should have given the whole draft to Mike and Mike. Remember them? The guys from ESPN Radio, Mike and Mike. For the same reason that Vin Scully is the broadcasting GOAT. It's because radio people have a skill set. I've got to make this real to you as you listen to me without the benefit of any audiovisual aid that I can point to. I don't have a weather map. I don't have B-roll. I've got some video that you can watch, and I'll show you, for example, a little clip here. My favorite clip of yesterday is the president talking about Joe Biden being a sleepy guy. So I'll demonstrate how radio will use. If you're watching at hughhewitt.com or at YouTube or on Facebook or Instagram, you will see this. If not, I will describe it to you. It's Joe Biden being referred to as a sleepy guy in the basement by the president. Roll cut number 17.
Yes, thank you. Looking forward to November, the election. Given the risk that the flu and the coronavirus come back, there could be a problem. Do you think there is a risk that there will be lack of agreement, lack of legitimacy to the results in a very close election, and people start saying, well, a whole bunch of people couldn't go and vote because they were scared?
I can't tell you what's going to happen in an election. Yeah, great question. I can't tell you what's going to happen. We have a sleepy guy in a basement of a house that the press is giving a free pass to, who doesn't want to do debates because of COVID, and lots of things are happening, right? And I watched a couple of interviews, and I say, oh, I look forward to this. But they're keeping him sheltered because of the coronavirus.
All right, so what just happened there?
He's not moving.
You just heard a superb communicator create an image. Sleepy Joe in the basement, and he's being kept sequestered because of the virus. He created an image of a man without energy and capacity. He'll drive that home. Joe Biden screwed up his fundraiser last night. He said the president was going to postpone the election. Honest to goodness, Joe. In any event, here's what's happening right now. When you watch television, their ratings are through the sky, even CNN. Poor old CNN. You know, always the last child in the family, right? No one watches it. And even CNN is getting more viewers. But you watch and you don't learn. When you listen, you learn. I am conveying information. My interviews are long and textured and nuanced, and I prepare for them, and they contain news. They ask questions that aren't rote and are not routine. When President Trump goes out and meets with, and, you know, Media Matters, if you're listening, email, you can go get that clip. Hewitt made a mistake. He said President Biden. Yeah, go ahead. It doesn't matter. Nothing matters. Everyone's made up their mind about this election. It will only change depending upon when they focus on the choice in October and November. Who do I want to lead this economy? Make the economy great again. MEGA. Make America great again. He did that. Make the economy great again. We want the blue-collar boom back. You're going to trust Trump. You're not going to trust Biden. Honestly, Biden won't even be president. If he's still on the ticket, you realize he'll be run by whoever his advisors are. Not the vice president. This vice president's going to be like the vice president in Veep. But what my point is, TV anchors cannot make news because they do not listen. They are coached. They are told what to do. We make news because our guests, whether it's Hillary Clinton or John Kerry or Madeleine Albright or Chris Coons or Angus King, anyone from the left, or it's William Barr and Mitch McConnell or Donald Trump and Vice President Pence and Mike Pompeo from the right, whether it's Majority Leader McConnell or Leader McCarthy, I give them a fair shake. Nancy Pelosi would get the fairest shake in the world, but you get a tough interview. If the Vice President Biden came on, he'd get a great interview. But I would ask him, do you mind being called Sleepy Joe? And then I would drill down. The things you are calling for have already been done. Do you have anything new? Do you want to explain why you would not have been a disaster because you would not have imposed the ban on inbound flights from China on other than American citizens and green card holders? You said it was xenophobic. Did you not? It would be a difficult interview. He won't make it through any difficult interview. He's never going to come out and play tag. He's going to stay in the blue bubble. And they think they're doing great. They got these polls that tell them they're winning. You know what? People are going to go into that voting booth and they're going to say, my gosh, Joe Biden does not have the capacity to lead this country. I don't know who's going to be it. Trump swings from the hip. He's Babe Ruthian in his energy. He is occasionally off the cuff. He thinks out loud. They mock him. But he meets every day with Joe Biden's advance team. Every day he goes out and I watch it. And I say, why are you meeting with Joe Biden's advance team? Why do you do that? Because 90% of the people in that room and 99% of the people in the Beltway media hate Trump. Hate him. Because he has contempt for their craft. And it is a craft. And I'm very good at it. I'm not as good as Rush. Rush built them all. I'm just a tenant in it. But I'm very good at it after 30 years. And it's because I listen and I prepare. And the NFL draft last night was terrible because it was a bunch of television guys who don't even know how to repeat the names of the people they're directing the question to. You know when I say Dwayne, I say, Dwayne, what are you doing? I've given him a signal to wake up and get over to the microphone. He's lying down. Dwayne, would you come over to the microphone? Did see?
Yes.
He's very deeply asleep. So we got him on the camera. Ben puts him on the camera now. So did you watch the draft at all? You were talking to Campbell last night.
No.
Okay, so you missed how it was awful. It was terrible. And you know why? They don't know how to do verbal cues. They only know how to do television cues, and they don't have a stage manager, a stage director, a set director. They don't have a producer. They don't have a bug in their ear. They got nothing.
It's actually, I mean, the whole format of it, it's just there's nothing. They tried to make something out of something that is very routine and you do in a closed, smoky old room. I mean, when we had Little League drafts,
Yeah, well, when you have everyone does a fantasy football draft, everybody knows how to do a draft. I watched it all, by the way. I guess I turned it off at like pick 30 because I was got to go to bed.
It's
But
not.
I'll tell you what,
It's not a made-for-TV event.
no, radio skills involve telling you everything and painting pictures.
Telling
Television
stories.
skills,
Telling stories.
Telling story. Television skills. Oh my gosh, it was awful to watch. And that's why I make news and nobody else does at the level in which I do. My Washington Post column on why Leader McConnell is right about the states is up at thewashingtonpost.com on the front page. Go there. The leader is right. Rescue and relief of the states must be accompanied by reform. Rescue and relief of the states must be accompanied by reform. Leader Mitch McConnell is Cocaine Mitch. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. It's Friday. I'm happy. I've got the draft to watch tonight, all day tomorrow. That's something to do. That is, in addition to going a long distance outdoors in a socially distant, responsible fashion. I'm here to tell you, I am amused by the Trump haters who are abusing the remarks he made about ultraviolet light and its impact on disinfecting the virus. It doesn't prove what they think it proves. It proves to America that the White House press corps and the media are the Joe Biden advance team. That's all it proves. It didn't say what they say he said. You got a spokesperson for Lysol. I'm never buying Lysol again. Lysol spokesman this morning. Well, I've had some bad days on this job, but I've never had to write a press release telling people not to administer disinfected product through injection, ingestion, or any other route. That is David Itzkoff, who is a blue check over at Twitter, quoting a Lysol spokesperson who was asked by NBC News, can you inject it? All right, so that's not what the president said. Doesn't matter. Everybody knows the mask is off. President Trump meets with the Joe Biden advance team every afternoon. And he goes to battle with them like he battles for you and for the country with the Chinese, the Communist Chinese Party, which unleashed this deadly virus. And these people are unaware of it. They are blissful. Not one person asked about the disinformation campaign that China is waging. It is out of control. China blaming America for the pandemic it unleashed upon the world. Mike Pompeo took it apart. Meanwhile, no one covers what Kevin McCarthy said yesterday about the shame that attaches to the House Democrats. Cut number six. This is the leader. Yesterday, Leader McCarthy on the floor. Cut number 6.
It's interesting to know why we're here. At 8:30 today, we actually found the reason. 4.4 million more reasons why we're here. How many of those 4.4 million would not have gotten a pink slip last week? Had we listened more than 2 weeks ago on April 7th, when we said the program we created that was so successful, that was able to do the number of loans in 14 days that it took the SBA to do in 14 years, that there was such a need out there that maybe we would overcome politics for that one moment. Could it be too much to read that it was one simple page? I thought there was a moment in time it would happen. I thought we could say yes on a unanimous consent. This is a program we all had just voted for in Shirley just 2 weeks before. Yes, that was tough to get that bill through. Yes, we had to have it held up on the other side. That was wrong, that other millions were laid off. But this was the moment to learn from that mistake on the other side before. We did not learn. It was played again. To those 4.4 million Americans that were laid off this week, Congress owes you an apology. You did not have to have that happen. To the small business owner, I understand this greatly. At age 20, I created my first business. I know where you make these decisions. You make these decisions on the kitchen table. If you ever had a small business, you realize you're the first to work, you're the last to leave, and you're the last to be paid. You know those who work with you are not just employees, they are your family. You know their children's name, you're there at their weddings, you're there when they graduate, and you're proud of them. You never want to have to say you're going to lay them off. You put everything into your business to succeed, and government told them they had to shut down for the health of the nation. They made a sacrifice, but they got sacrificed for politics last week.
Kevin McCarthy on this. He is absolutely 100% correct. Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer caused millions of layoffs that did not have to happen by holding up a program that did have to pass. And they're trying to deflect onto Mitch McConnell, saying now to the states, we will not bail you out without reform because you will waste the money and some of you will steal the money. You've got to vote Republican if you want to get this country back after this terrible virus unleashed on the world by the Chinese Communist Party. You have to vote at every level GOP, or we're going to go deep, deep, deep into the trench. Stay tuned. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway, joined now by Marc Lotter. He is the Director of Strategic Communications for Trump-Pence 2020. Good morning, Mark. How are you feeling? Is the Lotter family well?
Lotter's family well, Hugh, and hope yours is as well. It's I think we're like everyone else, ready to get back at it, get outside.
Okay, I've got to begin with the key question, the elephant in the room. Why does President Trump agree every day to meet with a room full of Joe Biden's advance team? It's like 90% of the reporters in the White House press are Joe Biden's advance team. Why does he do that every day?
Well, because if he doesn't, then there will be no other side of the story. That the American people will just be force-fed the liberal groupthink of the White House press corps and the rest of the mainstream media.
Do you see what they're doing this morning? Yesterday, he talked about the UV raids, and he talked about maybe we can find a way to use UV in treatment, and they're trying to turn him into Homer Simpson pouring bleach down his. Do you watch this with amazement at how uniform they are? What groupthink is going on here?
Unfortunately, it doesn't surprise me. Because that's what they do. They look to try to poke holes and to make this president look bad because it fulfills their narrative. I mean, I'm actually reading a story right now from the Associated Press this morning that's almost celebrating that the myth of American exceptionalism is gone. What is that? That's not. America is exceptional.
Marc Lotter, I had Attorney General William Barr on the show this week. And the most important thing he said was the last thing he said before he had to go on break. I asked him about the press, and here is what he said.
Absolutely. I think it has, very pernicious impact on the republic to have a media that is so concentrated and monolithic and in its views, and also so
deregulation. Dr. Birx and Dr. Fauci
partisan, really.
The Supreme.
De Tocqueville said that he thought a press would essentially help prevent America from becoming a despotism, but that's only if it remains, a highly diverse set of voices, and if it ever combines into, one viewpoint, then it will actually become counterproductive for the republic. So I'm very disturbed by the monolithic nature of our press.
Do you agree with the Attorney General, Marc Lotter?
No, I do. And as a former member of the media and what I trained when I was in college and spent the first dozen or so years after college in the media, what it has become now is not what it's supposed to be. They are more cheerleaders for their own point of view and their partisan outcomes than they are that fourth estate to hold those accountable and answerable. It's really just sad to see what's become of the national media.
Well, it's disfigured the mission of the craft. The late Michael Kelly was a very revered guest on this show for many years until he died in Iraq, and he used to describe journalism as a craft, not a profession. And the craft has been disfigured by TDS, and it shows up every night in the White House. So I'm circling back to the question I wonder if you and Brad Parscale have raised with the president, which is they ought to insist on some new faces in that room, that they ought to include some neutral people, some scientists, some science reporters, some health reporters, because this is a get Trump game every night.
No, you're absolutely right, and I think we have started to see a little bit of that starting to sneak into the room. Not from most of the outlets because they just send their same liberal reporters that they always do. But I have seen some more, especially when you get into some of the economic side. The business channels are doing that. That's a good thing. But to your point, we need more of that. But we also need the media to realize that their job is to report and leave it to others to do the analysis and let the president get up there, give the facts, ask your questions. He'll answer your questions. We all know that. But drop your partisan guards and let's remember this is about America.
It's about a crisis. It's about a historic crisis engulfing the country, and they can't let go of their hatred for Donald Trump. I have never been as disappointed in my craft in 30 years of practicing it than in the last 30 days. Now, Marc Lotter, let me talk to you a little bit about the other side of the campaign, Vice President Biden, referred to as a sleepy guy in the basement by the president yesterday in his typical colorful fashion. But the great white shark in the water is that Joe Biden will not come out and talk to the media. I mean, he's darting around and he's talking to like the AAA and the AA and the single A players around the country, but he's not talking to me or people who will ask him fair, courteous, but serious questions. I don't know if he's up to it.
I think this has definitely played into their strategy. And if you recall, there was some reporting back toward the end of the primary season about how they were trying to pull Joe Biden back, and they were only going to do very short events, very short interviews because he wasn't up to it. And now they've been aided by these stay-at-home orders because he doesn't have to go out there and actually campaign, expose himself to the media, so he can hide in his basement, do a couple of softball interviews with with liberal CNN and MSNBC, and call it a day. But you got to wonder, he can't even get through those interviews without looking at notes and getting it wrong. It's going to be very stark when this thing gets back up and running again.
It is a startling amount of confusion that we see in his attempt to deliver a message that has clearly been walked through beforehand. You're a professional comms director and a journalist. You know he's trying to hit some points, right? He's trying to perfect his swing, and he's not making contact.
Yeah, and you really have to wonder, I mean, this is not his first time with doing this. He should be able to deliver a message, but when he's got to refer to notes, and even then, getting the fundamentals wrong. I mean, not remembering what year 9/11 took place. I mean, to use his own phrase, come on, man.
Come on. Well, I'm in my D.C. studio, so I do not have my Biden board in front of me where I can play all that. But let's talk about the debates, Marc Lotter, because I think we have to begin to focus now. I do not believe the Presidential Commission should set them up. I think the president's got to insist on 5, 6, 7 of them and say, I'm going to name one, you're going to name one, and those two will agree on a third. Because I do think I've never seen the media this completely lopsided as we begin a presidential campaign. I don't know that you have. How are you going to handle debates?
Well, the president has already sent a very clear message to the debate commission that he's looking at this. And I think it's a very strong signal that he's sending that, look, we're not just going to let you create a panel of liberal journalists and do a one-sided debate where you attack the president of the United States and run cover for the former vice president. So he's going to demand fairness, and I know that's something that they're still working on. We have time to get this worked out, but clearly the president has shown he's interested in debating Joe Biden. He's not afraid to debate Joe Biden, but we need to make sure that there's a level playing field.
Are negotiations underway between Trump-Pence 2020 and the Biden campaign on the structure and format of the debates?
I have not heard of that. That does not mean that it's not going on, but since obviously we're all socially distanced right now, I can't just look around the corner and see if those things are going on right now or not.
Okay, well, I would ask Brad Parscale to speak to that. It would be, if we had a working press corps, they would ask that question of him. And I do believe in the arbitration panel approach where President Trump names a journalist and Vice President Biden names a journalist, and those two journalists agree on a third. That would end up being fair. And they change them for every debate. And the locales that the Presidential Debate Commission came up with are fine. But I cannot, after watching this night after night, it is confirming, I think, in the American public that the media is not a fair and neutral prison. It has been most revealing of the media and of Deborah Birx and of Tony Fauci's genius and of the president's willingness to be led by them. But it is most confirming of this deep, deep TDS, Mark. And I don't know how you do your job every day with this. I know you have to. They're all my friends, too. I like them all. I got nothing against them, but they are very unaware. Self-awareness is gone from the, quote, media.
No, I think you're right. And this is one of those prime examples why I think great swaths of the country have when they look at the media, they look at what they see going on, they realize that they don't represent them. They're not out there to inform them. They're out there trying to sway them and change their opinions. And it's why you see the trust in the media, the viewership with the traditional liberal networks at their all-time lows, because people are tired of being force-fed this liberal nonsense and being looked down upon if you don't agree with it.
Well, I will note they are experiencing a Trump bump and a crisis bump. Prior to the advent of the crisis and the daily briefings, the network cable news television stations were crashing in viewership, but now they're back up and robust because people want information. I don't think they want gotcha journalists trying to embarrass the president and members of his team and try and get them to fight. I think they really would like to know the science, Marc Lotter. I've been begging them. John Roberts finally asked a question the other day about what do we know about the scientific mutation of the virus? And Deborah Burke said, good question. The president said, good question. It took like 30 days to get to the science. I despair of this media, and I despair of your job. I do not think you're going to, it's a phalanx. It's like an old Greek Spartan phalanx of anti-Trump people coming at you every day. Last word to you, Marc. I don't know how you deal with it.
Well, I think that's the one thing, and just keeping up and keeping out there. You know, most people don't think of it this way, but I do. Every time the president takes to his full social media platform, he reaches a Super Bowl-sized audience. That's how big that audience is. And so he is the first president in history that can bypass the mainstream media and get his message directly to the American people. Now he's doing both. He's using them and he's going around them.
Marc Lotter, good to talk to you. Thanks for coming back on. Continue on. Follow him on Twitter at Marc, MARC _ Lotter, LOTTER, at Marc _ Lotter. And you will be tuned into the Director of Strategic Communications at Trump Pence. Coming up after the break, James Hohmann. Always follow a bit of journalism bashing with a good journalist. James is a good one. But first, I got to tell you about ReliefFactor.com. This is why the studio is called ReliefFactor.com Studio. That's the wrong camera. That's the right bag, the wrong camera. ReliefFactor.com, ReliefFactor.com. I take it in the first hour of the show. I remind you about 2 more times so that during the course of the day, and especially on the weekend, for those of you who have, I used to say you've been at work all week. Well, you haven't been. You've been at home all week, many millions of you. I got millions of people listening to this show, and I know that there are millions of different stories, and 50,000 families out there have lost someone to COVID and are grieving. And they can't grieve the right way. They can't do it with friends. They can't sit Shiva if they're Jewish. They can't have the funeral mass if they're Catholic. They can't have a ceremony of remembrance. Everything is different. Everything is upside down. But I got to encourage you, got to get outside every day. You got to walk in a socially distant, responsible fashion. You got to run, trundle, whatever you do. You got to get outside. And not just because sun helps, but because your body just got to circulate, and ReliefFactor.com will help you deal with the aches and pains of doing that. Even if you hate walking up those stairs, your knees bark at you every time, or your elbow hurts I haven't been to see the PT with my rotator cuff tear in 7 weeks. And so it's just a pain in the shoulder, not the neck. You might have one of those, ReliefFactor.com. Also want to remind you, Honor Bound Coffee, all one word, honorboundcoffee.com. When you get your coffee sent to you through the mail, you not only get the best coffee in America, it's terrific, wonderful. You have a company that donates 100% of their profits, 100% of their profits to military family organizations like the Injured Marine Semper Fi Fund, the YMCA's on bases. That's who they give their money to. They just started 3 months ago, going great. They're building up their base. People are subscribing every day. Please go and do that. Also want to include an absolute reminder, andrewandtodd.com. If you need to get money out of your house, you need a reverse mortgage, go to andrewandtodd.com, answer a few questions, or call them at 888-888-1172. I'll be right back on The Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. Our big Jims are many. One of them is James Hohmann, Washington Post Daily 202 reporter. Follow him on Twitter at James Hohmann. He is sadly from the great state of Minnesota. James, did you like the Vikings draft last night?
I did. Yeah, I think we needed those guys.
All right. Yeah, I just don't. It's a forlorn hope up there. That's what they used to call the charge at a fortress, and that's what the Vikings are with the Packers reloading at quarterback. James, the number one question that I have for the media is, when was the last time Joe Biden held a press conference? Do you know offhand?
I don't know offhand, but I'm not really covering the Biden beat. I've sort of been moved to coronavirus stuff. But I think he actually did field reporter. I'm not defending. Obviously, he should be more accessible. But I think a couple weeks ago, he actually did do like a Zoom call where reporters were able to ask questions in the last 2 or 3 weeks.
Now, of course, a Zoom call is controlled completely by the campaign. And so, to your knowledge, in the course of the last month, has he appeared in a socially distanced fashion like the president does, with reporters on the lawn or in a room where he could take questions? Has he done that?
No, there's not like a press corps camped out in Wilmington, Delaware. He's very much kind of in his house in Wilmington. You know, they are in Biden's defense. You know, they're pooling his fundraisers. So yesterday he had 2 fundraisers, and they let reporters join those calls. Again, controlled by the campaign. Biden isn't being asked questions, but they are allowing those fundraisers to be pooled.
So you're on the coronavirus beat, and I understand that. How in the world do we know how he would do with the questions that the president gets every night when he meets with what I've been calling the the Biden advance team? It's really 90%. It's the Biden advance team when they have this scrum every night. How do we know how Joe Biden would do and what he would say about the coronavirus if he was asked even a remotely difficult question like, how would you reopen the states? We don't have any answers from him, James.
Well, I mean, there's no question we want to hear more from Biden in specifics about his plan. But, you know, there's an old truism in politics: when you think your opponent's kind of screwing up, let him. And the Biden campaign, you know, believes that Trump's press conferences are unhelpful, and they're, you know, the way they spin it, at least, is that they're happy to have him be out there and, you know, kind of being on the sidelines. They're trying to get in the conversation. I think Biden has done some local TV hits, where he might be talking to some local reporters. And, you know, he was on like James Corden's show. Obviously that's not hard hitting, but the comedy show earlier.
It was for Nancy Pelosi.
It was. That was an unforced error.
Unforced error. That goes into the books of all-time dumb things. All right, James, I want to ask you about COVID. The studies are showing a lot of a virus that was undetected. From your perspective of doing this story every day, when do you think the first case got here?
I think January. There were definitely cases in January here. I mean, the studies, I mean, and it's one of those things where, you know, you hear from listeners, I hear from readers. I've got, you know, at this point, hundreds of emails over the last 2 months with people being like, I think I had coronavirus in January. And these are serious people, you know, who had all the symptoms, and they went to the doctor, and the doctor was like, man, you've got a bad case of pneumonia. And the more that we learn, you know, the coroners in Santa Clara County finding out that, you know, they're moving up the timeline. Their first death was February 6th. You know, if someone was dying on February 6th, that means there were people in the Bay Area that had it in January. And, you know, so I think that a lot of these people who've been kind of emailing me saying, I think I might have had it, you know, not all of them did. Some of them had the flu or other stuff, but it definitely was kind of floating around with asymptomatic people. You know, there's so many mysteries about this virus we still don't know the answers to that we're trying to unlock. There's a lot of promising stuff that's happening. Yale's doing a really interesting study of the sailors aboard the USS Teddy Roosevelt, because one of the cool things about the Navy is, you know, they have detailed records of where every guy was every hour of the day, you know, on a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. And so they also have all these guys' medical records. So they're trying really hard to do serology testing and follow the spread of transmission. You know, and so we're still learning so much about this that we don't quite understand how it works, which, you know, it is kind of alarming, but also something that we have to acknowledge how much we
it's
really
vast.
Don't know.
The combined scientific power of the world is on this virus, and that's why I'm an optimist. But there's one thing I'd never hear asked by the Biden advance team in the White House when they get Trump up there. Children have been spared, Jim. And if it were not so, we would be in a grievous, grievous situation. But I worry that viruses mutate. 1918 they went through 12 passages in the summer of 1918. Has anyone, we only got 30 seconds, anyone done any study on whether children's vulnerability will be greater or lesser in the fall?
Yes, this is something that is being looked at. I actually talked to people at some children's hospitals earlier this week. There is definitely concern about that. We don't know. So far, the virus actually has not mutated as much as a normal virus would, which has been surprising. It hasn't been mutating the way the 1918 virus did. That actually, in some ways, is good because it means it'll be easier to contain, and that a vaccine might work against more of it. But unfortunately, the statistics are small. Few kids are dying. You're absolutely right. But when it's your kid that's dying, those statistics don't matter. Yesterday in New York, a 5-month-old died. Earlier this week in Detroit, a 5-year-old died. There are some really tragic cases, but you're absolutely right. So far, kids largely spared.
James, if you write a column on that, I think it'll be the most read column because the Biden advance team that masquerades as the White House press corps will not ask about the children. And that is what is of greatest concern to parents and grandparents. And if you write that, it'll go everywhere. Just update us on what is in store for the kids. I appreciate it. James Hohmann of the Washington Post. Stay tuned. Dr. Larry Arnn is next on The Hugh Hewitt Show. Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. It's Hugh Hewitt. That music means it's time for the Hillsdale Dialogue. In fact, it's time for the first of 3 Hillsdale Dialogues in a row that I'll be doing with Hillsdale's president, Dr. Larry Arnn, who is then featured in most of our Hillsdale Dialogues back to 2013. But these 3 are special because America's in a crisis. We are taping them all on April 24th in the middle of the uncertainty and as we cross 50,000 deaths in America. Because Dr. Arnn is uniquely situated to comment on how Winston Churchill led in a crisis from the beginning of the assemblage of the Hitler machinery through the end of the war, and as we approach the 75th anniversary of Victory in Europe Day, which we were going to make a big deal about, but now will probably pass obscured. Dr. Larry Arnn joins me. Good morning, Dr. Arnn. How are you?
I'm good. How you doing?
Good. How are things at Hillsdale College?
Excessively quiet, but good.
Right.
We just had online convocation yesterday, and it was pretty. And a lot of the kids watched it from all over the country, and we wish they were here. And I think they ought to be here. I don't agree with all this stuff that's going on.
Well, I hope they all listen to these 3 hours. Because I think not only is it the 75th anniversary of Victory in Europe Day approaching next month, but we're also in the middle of a crisis unlike any that we have seen, and there are ways that nations can acquit themselves well, and there are ways that they can be defeated, right? This is why we study crises.
Right. If you, so, the Second World War was glorious and disastrous for Great Britain, and Churchill forecast that his first time he gave a formal forecast of it was in 1901, in one of his first big speeches in the Parliament, and he said, "The wars of the great nations will not be like anything we've ever seen. The destruction of the victors will be almost indistinguishable from that of the vanquished." And so he spent his life. It's not well known about him, but he spent his life trying to avoid those big wars all his life. And the wars were, and so the first thing to know, when Churchill was asked in the Second World War, what shall we call the war? And he later published this in his history of the war. He called it, "That's easy. This is the unnecessary war. We didn't have to do this." And
we did not have to be in this crisis either. I mean, if the Chinese Communist Party had complied with the rules of the WHO to which they are signatories, we would not be in the present crisis.
And it put everything on the wrong foot, that the fact that this virus came out of China and there was no data. And so, everything is catching up. We're getting antibody tests now, and those are projecting much lower death rates than the early projections. I mean, much, by an order of magnitude lower. But still very high, very, very high compared to the flu. And the New York study said half of 1%, that's 0.00, let me get that right, 0.05. And the flu is kind of typically 0.1 to 0.2%. So it's worse. But we don't have any way to stop it except keep people apart from each other. And that shuts down the economy, and that carries health effects on its own and many other kinds of effects. So
it is 0.5% versus 0.2%, significantly higher, but not what had been feared.
Well, see, we don't know yet for sure. Like my hero, Dr. Ioannidis in Stanford, predicts under 0.2%. And, they were talking about 2 million deaths, right? And I just looked at the CDC website this morning, and they say we could save 200,000 lives in the next 4 weeks by not having an economy. But then, right now, as things stand, there isn't any reason why those people won't die in the next month after that. And so it's anyway. And the point was unprepared, right? We made huge mistakes. There's a lot of good writing about that. Mark Hemingway in particular, and he's in an online conference we're airing at the end of this week. and we made a lot of mistakes, and we made a lot of mistakes because we weren't ready, and also because, goodness, the place where one of these outbreaks happens is the place to stop it. But the Chinese let it run for more than a month, and they actually canceled flights from Wuhan to the rest of China 2 weeks earlier than they canceled flights from Wuhan to the rest of the world.
And by the way, I believe that when we look back, the decision of President Trump to close the country to inbound flights from China bought us time within which to make mistakes. And just like Great Britain made enormous mistakes at the beginning of the war, whether it was Norway or other things, we'll talk about that. You need time to make mistakes, and that bought us a little bit of time to make mistakes. Dr. Arnn, that conference will air at hillsdale.edu. I assume it will be available for anyone to watch for the next many weeks as well.
Yep, that's right. Easy to find.
That's a conference on the coronavirus. You should watch that. But now I want to embarrass Dr. Arnn a little bit. When we talk about Churchill and victory in Europe and the crisis of the last century, Dr. Arnn is uniquely qualified to do this because of his standing in the world of Churchill, not just because he wrote Churchill's Trial, an excellent book, or the prefaces to 7 or 8 volumes of the papers of Winston Churchill, and of Martin Gilbert, but because you've spent your life studying him. And would you just expand for the audience for a couple of minutes how much time you have spent on Churchill so they understand when you speak about him, it's not you and I shooting the breeze about the Browns draft last night?
Well, there's a lot to know, and nobody knows everything. But and Churchill's life is so big that it takes forever, and it has taken me forever to know what I know. But it started in 1975, I think it was, with a dog bite. I was bitten by a dog. We have these boxer dogs, and the first one was a big fighter. And the other dog bit me. And my hand swelled up, and I was confined to bed, and I was house-sitting for a guy recently deceased who'd written his doctoral thesis on Churchill. And so what was in the house to read but Churchill books? And I picked one up, and I read them for 2 weeks while I mended. And I just never stopped. And that's a long time ago. And in 1977, I got a scholarship, and I went to England to study Churchill. And through Harry Jaffa, another great teacher of mine, I met Martin Gilbert, later Sir Martin Gilbert. And so for 3 years, I was director of research. When he appointed me that, he just, we didn't talk about money when he hired me. We were in the London School of Economics, and I had an introduction to him, and he had to meet me because of Harry Jaffa, because they knew each other, and Jaffa had been a benefit to him. And I later learned that, of course, that was a tiresome duty for him. He was besieged by graduate students wanting to get into the Churchill papers. And I didn't think I needed to get into the Churchill papers. And so the first thing in the conversation was I had read his books, and authors really like that. And so that was a big deal. And then I offered to help him. And he offered to help me, and I said, well, I don't really need anything, but, I could help you. I've got some time here. Because, graduate students think that they think that they're eternal, right? So I didn't realize that I was going to be extremely busy all my life. I thought I was going to just go to the library. And you can see about 2 weeks ahead when you're that age. And I said, I can help you. I've got some money here, and I've got a scholarship, and if you need me to look stuff up, call. And he said, would you like a job? And I said, yes. And he said, when could you start? It was Thursday or Friday, and I said, Monday. And he said, okay, see you Monday. And he left. And I chased him down the stairs, and I said, where should I go? And he said, Oxford, Harcourt Hill, the map house. The cab driver will know. And I said, okay. Oxford, I said, should I live in Oxford? And he said, that would be better. So I moved over the weekend. And
45 years later.
Yeah.
We're 45 years later, he is still working on Churchill, and never has it been more relevant since the war ended than in the moment of current crisis, which we'll discuss when we come back. I encourage everyone to go to hillsdale.edu. All of the Hillsdale Dialogues are collected at hughforhillsdale.com. We've talked about Churchill often. We've never talked about it in the middle of a crisis. And we've never talked about how a great man leads or how bad decisions are made and good decisions are made. But we're going to do so this week, next week, and the third week. And then I'm going to replay it all sometime around the 75th anniversary of the war. But I encourage you to watch the Hillsdale Symposium on the virus and the crisis over at hillsdale.edu. It's an amazing lineup of people. Go and do that and come right back after the break to the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. This is the Hillsdale Dialogue with Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College. All things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu. This is the first of 3 hours, all of which will be played on Friday, May 8th, which is fortuitously the 75th anniversary of Victory in Europe Day. And we will replay these 3 hours, which is about the war, and it's also about crisis, and it's about civilization. Dr. Arnn, you sent me a note. The central principle of civilization is the subordination of the ruling authority to the settled customs of the people and to their will as expressed through the Constitution. All right, so I had the Attorney General of the United States on this week, very worried, very, very worried that we are subordinating the Constitution to the crisis. He did not say he was going to do anything about it, but what kind of wartime measures occurred in Great Britain that we might want to be aware of, and how quickly were they lifted during a great war in which bombs fell and people were killed almost nightly for years?
Well, the controls were comprehensive in Britain. It became comprehensive as the war went on. And there are three main things. One is they had a thing called Rule 18b, which they amended. And if you were suspected of working against the government, you could be detained, and you couldn't get a writ of habeas corpus, which means present the body. You couldn't go before a judge.
The great
you could
writ.
be detained indefinitely. And in the war, at the high point, accumulated total of 1,000 people were detained that way. And beginning in 1943, Churchill repealed the rule. When it became clear they were going to win the war, the United States was in, Russia was in, and he started releasing the prisoners, and so at the end there were just a few. And, the man who would have been Hitler's toady to run Great Britain, a man named Oswald Mosley, who, interestingly enough, found himself on a train with Martin Gilbert one time, and they had a long talk. And Martin Gilbert was a Jew, so that was really interesting. And Martin Gilbert did what he did. He interviewed him and took down everything he said. And anyway, Churchill let him go. And there was a lot of criticism of that. And Churchill, in answering that criticism, always gave the same answer. That is, the purpose of the British government is to protect the civil liberties of the British people. And we do not interfere with them except in the most urgent need. So that was one thing. And that speech that you quoted from is called Civilization, and it's the commencement address in 1938 at Bristol University, of which Churchill is to this day the longest-serving chancellor. And
he also he conferred decrees at Bristol in the middle of the Blitz. I'm amazed by that story, which I just read. In the middle of this carnage, he walked, and they do full regalia.
There's a old video when he was appointed chancellor in the 1920s of the students picking him up and carrying him down the street. Big old mob of them. Yeah, he loved things like that. He went back to Harrow all the time. And that's another thing that's important. Churchill did a lot of things that emphasized the importance of normal life, although life was very abnormal. So the first thing was 18b. Then there was rationing of everything, allocation of everything. And Churchill put members of the Labor Party in charge of all that because he understood the unions were very strong and they would do what the Labor Party said quicker than what he said. And they squeezed that country like a turnip. And Churchill would say so out loud. And then there was censorship of the press. And that's an interesting story. There was they formed a body in 1939, even just before the war broke out. Neville Chamberlain formed it. And that became very effective and even popular and accepted. And the reason is, after Churchill got rid of John Reith, who'd been the head of the BBC and had censored Churchill in the 30s, wouldn't let him broadcast, Churchill fired him right away. He put Brendan Bracken in there. First Duff Cooper and then Brendan Bracken. And Duff Cooper, they're both very good friends of Churchill, close to him. And Brendan Bracken just gave the job to the editors of the newspapers. And
You see, when we come back from break, we're going to talk about we do not advocate any of these things, but so that people understand we're not near anything, even though we're in a crisis. We're not anything like the crisis that convulsed the world in the last century. We'll continue the conversation with Dr. Larry Arnn right after this. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt in the year of the plague, 2020, April 24th, this Friday, and the next 2 Fridays. I'll be talking with Dr. Larry Arnn during the Hillsdale Dialogue, the last radio hour of the week, and all of May 8th, about victory in Europe, World War II, the leadership of Churchill in a crisis, because it comes at a time of crisis in the United States. In the last segment, Dr. Arnn, all things Hillsdale, Hillsdale EDU, including a big conference on coronavirus and civil liberties. We were talking about press restraints, Rule 18B. Parliament also met in secret. These are all in stark contrast to the limited impositions on American citizenship. We're not suggesting censorship. We're not suggesting arrest. No one is doing anything like that. But nevertheless, we do find ourselves uniquely burdened by government orders right now of the sort that we have not been under since World War II.
Well, we've done, I hasten to add that they didn't censor criticism of the government in the Second World War, and the censorship was accomplished chiefly by newspaper editors. Brendan Bracken, Churchill's good friend, was appointed to that. He had founded the Financial Times, and so that was good. That was relatively uncontroversial. But you have to remember what we have done is we've stopped people making a living. We've stopped them assembling. We've stopped them moving about. And there's lists in Michigan. Michigan's the worst state, I think, maybe New York City. But there are lists of things you can buy and not buy. And so what you said at the break, you can't buy seeds, right? So
Correct.
We couldn't make victory gardens here.
You can't feed your family. You can't grow a tomato.
That's it. And so it's just, so there's some really bad stuff happening here, in my opinion, and on very questionable constitutional grounds.
Your friend and mine, Victor Davis Hanson, wrote a piece this week that if you tell an American that they cannot take their boat into an empty or nearly empty pond and fish, the first thing that American will do is take their boat out onto the pond. Mm-hmm. And so it does not sit well with us. And these extraordinary measures of World War II, as I've been listening to Eric Larson's book, and you've been reading the prefaces that you put together, I have a woj here of prefaces that you've done to Martin Gilbert's papers. I'm struck by the fact that in World War II, children died. Children died in horrible ways, on train fires and on torpedoed boats. This virus has spared us that most awful part of a plague. Thus far, I'm most concerned. The reason I'm more cautious than many conservatives is I know the science of 1918 that viruses mutate. I don't want children to die. But in World War II, children died by the thousands, and still the Britons went to work.
Yeah, and see, another thing is, and that's the difference between now, is that, I've talked about the controls, and they were severe. And they did, by the way, lead to the election of a socialist government after the war. But, and I'm not sure the controls did that, by the way. I think the abysmal record of the Conservative Party in the 30s that got them into the war is what really did that. But people had work to do, see? In other words, if you just read Churchill's speeches, we'll read some of them, he's explaining to them how they can help. And everybody wanted to help. And they had this thing called mass observation that I think might be better than our polls. What they did was got several thousand people in Britain to keep a diary of stuff they heard, stuff they noticed in the paper, they didn't put names of who said things in it, but they would send those in, and these analysts at mass observations would analyze the state of public opinion. They never rated the popularity of Winston Churchill lower than 80% during the war. And, it was like there was blackout rules, right? Well, you could get arrested for breaking them, but that's not what happened. What happened is the neighbor would knock on your door. And there was a lot of crime in London. And it gave rise to organized crime after the war because there were bombed out places and they could be looted. And that sort of got organized, and the Metropolitan Police, which is not as big as it is today, it fought that, right? But leaving out of account scoundrels, my wife's mother was, she was a plotter for the Royal Air Force during the war, and she was very parsimonious about food. She was just really good at not cooking too much, and she learned that. Everybody learned that. And
economy.
And they were reasonably prosperous people, and the war was long in the past, but the habits didn't die.
So do you think that we are going to look back and say that the extraordinary measures being taken in the United States are overburdensome? It's early to say one way or the other. We do not know the course of this virus. We do not know when relief will arrive in the way of interventions or a vaccine. We don't know a lot. Do you think, given the precarious state of knowledge, that the governments have overreacted?
Yeah, I do think that. And the reason I think it is, there are two reasons. One is the spirit should be, right from the first minute, we're going to get everybody to help with this thing, and we're going to get this over with the minute we can, right? And there's no spirit like that, right? Instead, Fauci, the first question he's asked about the virus in Wuhan, he says, this is nothing the American people need to worry about. It is something we experts need to worry about. And that's the wrong spirit, right? Because, the Chinese, they can weld people into their apartments, which they did, right? But we can ask people to cooperate, and we will get it.
And that's why I've been urging that they sell pandemic bonds so that people can do something, not to just borrow money from unknowing taxpayers a generation hence, but to actually dig into their reserves and buy bonds like we did in World War II and World War I. And they get close to it, but then they don't put it in the right terms. I saw Larry Kudlow talking about it. He said they're not really bonds. They're just sort of gifts. Patriotism needs to be engaged.
If, we're going to have college come September, August, unless we're legally forbidden. And if we can get them, you can't. It's hard to buy things right now. But if you get them, everybody's going to get a mask or 2 or 10, and the place is going to be flooded with hand sanitizers. And we bought these cool little Clorox machines that cost $5,000 a piece, and they can fog a room in 3 minutes, and you can go back in it in 20, and it will be sanitary, until somebody pollutes it. But then you have hand sanitizers all over the place, and so. And as far as we can tell right now, this thing is not dangerous to the young. Well, it's dangerous to everybody, but it's not very dangerous and not dangerous to very many of the young. And we're watching that like a hawk. But you're supposed to carry on with your life, and Churchill encouraged people to do that, right? And there was rationing of gasoline, and there was. It's hard to get, right? And the coupon books, you had to watch what you ate. But
and what's interesting about the war to me is that people did try and find joy. They did not dwell on their heart. I mean, I can't even imagine what London looked like, or poor Coventry, or Plymouth, or Bristol, as we were talking about, after 500 Luftwaffe bombers would come by and kill hundreds of people and destroy large segment of the city. And then they went to, I just can't even imagine what the media would do with that today.
Well, first of all, you can imagine what London would look like, because if you drive down a London street and you see a row of old buildings and then suddenly a row of new buildings, and then go to the next place and turn left again, and you'll see that pattern repeated on the next block and the one after. Those are bombing patterns.
Wow.
They dropped the bombs in a row, and they would take 3 or 4 blocks of buildings out, and those have all been replaced now. But that's what it looked like, right? It was, except rubble, not those buildings, not the new buildings, now rubble, right? And, Churchill gave a great speech in 1942. The Coal Miners Union was the most radical of the unions, or one of the most. And it was in Labor Party country, and Churchill went up there and gave a talk to the coal miners in the North, where my wife comes from, and the title they give the speech is "We Cut the Coal," right? And these boys went over there and died, and people in London and Coventry and Birmingham and big cities got bombed. We cut the coal, and we cut more than we've ever cut. You see, that's, in other words, give people something to do. Because otherwise the danger is the government just regards us as carriers of pathogens. And that's, that civilization speech of Churchill. The word civil, it comes from the Latin word for citizen, right? And citizens relate to each other under laws that apply to them all. And that makes a friendship, right? And so he says that what we think of as, high civilization, painting and sculpting and all that stuff, great stuff, that flows from a civil order. And so Churchill wanted to keep that alive. And he's talking in 1938. 3 months later, after this speech, is the Munich agreements. 4 months, 5 months after that, Hitler breaks the Munich agreements and takes all of Czechoslovakia. And then 6 months after that, the war breaks out, right? These are dark days. And Churchill reminds the people in that commencement address of what's wrong with the Nazi rule. It militarizes everything. And in that place, there's no room for freedom. And that means people can't live fully human lives. So you have to keep in mind the object, right? Which is, and right now we have a fundamental dispute in America that's going to be affected by this one way or another. Is the object of the government to permit people to live private lives and make their own happiness? Is that
is the question? And freedom first or not?
Is it better to manage the society according to scientific principles? See, and if you just look at this thing, and I'm in some doubt, not nearly as much as you, about whether this lockdown has ever been justified. But I think it's clear it's not now. But the predictions that the scientists made about the death counts have been adjusted steadily downward. And in the case of Imperial College London, they estimated 500,000 and 2 million in America, and that's what led Trump and Boris Johnson, to close the economy. And 2 weeks later, and that's 2 days after the shutdown, he adjusted the numbers downward to in Britain, tops 20,000.
It has been a remarkable decline. I'm grateful for it. I am still alarmed by the passages issue, the evolution of the virus during the summer. We'll talk about that after the break. Dr. Larry Arnn is my guest. This is the Hillsdale Dialogue. Churchill in a crisis, the country in a crisis, then and now, as we approach the 75th anniversary of VE Day. Stay there. ReliefFactor.com. We're in the ReliefFactor.com studio. Don't forget, 1995 gets you started. You need to be out there exercising, no matter if you're doing it socially distanced or not, no matter how cautious you are. Wear your mask and walk, run, trundle, jog, do something. Don't sit in your house and watch cable all day long. It's bad for you. ReliefFactor.com. I'll be right back with Dr. Larry Arnn. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. It is the Hillsdale Dialogue on Friday, April the 24th, which I'll be replaying on Victory in Europe Day, May 8th, with Dr. Arnn, along with 2 other hours next week's, and then Friday, May 8th, when we commemorate the 75th anniversary of Victory in Europe. Dr. Arnn, it is, I can't let the first hour go by without noting this parallel. Churchill was right from the beginning about the danger that Germany posed throughout the 30s. He was right. He led through the war with the support of the public. He was turned out. Tom Cotton, like Donald Trump, were right from the beginning about the danger posed by the Chinese Communist Party. They were as right about the CCP as Churchill was about the Nazis, but Stanley Baldwin was as wrong about the CCP as Joe Biden has been. Joe Biden called the president xenophobic for shutting down inbound travel from China. And yet, at this point, the polls say Joe Biden is going to beat Donald Trump. It doesn't make any sense.
Well, it's a very divided country, and our particular way of division is something like the one in Britain in the 30s and 40s. Talking people, intellectual people of all kinds, they're the ones who want this revolution of our society, and they thought it up, and it's, in my opinion, it's not healthy. Because what they've done, what's happened to the academic world, is through the writings of John Dewey and people like that, they sort of, and this is a vast simplification, but it's true, they thought that there was not an objective and abiding truth to be known. Everything changes. And so then we should be liberated to get control of the process of change and make ourselves into whatever we want to be. And the distinction between those two positions is one of them is a search for a truth, for the way things are, and the other one is an exercise of power. And so, I think journalists today regard themselves as stakeholders. All you got to do is read about the debate about who gets admitted to the White House briefings, because they sort of think that space is theirs and they can allocate it somehow. But it's in the White House, right? And the people elect the person who lives in there and gives him control of it. And so those two alternate, and it's kind of heady, if all you are is a pitiful little academic, then all you get to do is teach a bunch of young people. But what if the real academic job was to plan and implement the future of the society? That's power. And people get wedded to it. And it's a shameful thing because, the best friends I've got in the world, they love what they know. And they love to meditate on it and think about it and develop it and teach it and talk about it, right? That's the old academic atmosphere. The new one is not that way. And so, this is, we're in a fundamental thing, and this plays into that thing.
And the old journalism, and Michael Kelly was a great journalist, killed covering the invasion of Iraq from the front, fell into the canal and died. Used to say on this show that journalism is a craft, not a profession. And the old craft, as I was talking to television craft especially, was begun by men who had been at the front lines of this war, Walter Cronkite and Andy Rooney and many others, Edwin R. Murrow. And they came back and they trained the next generation, the Brinkleys, who trained the third generation, the Brokaws. But now the fourth generation do not know Joseph, right? They don't really know this stuff anymore. And I think President Trump going out into that press room is a lot like going to meet with Joe Biden's advance team every day and let them pepper him. And it's sort of like Churchill meeting with, after the war, taking questions when he returned as prime minister from the opposition every day.
Yeah, it's there's a phalanx, right, and it's very uniform, and in the college world, we stand out because we're pretty good. We've got an excellent college and excellent qualifications and excellent success of the students, right? But there aren't very many like that actually conceive themselves in the way that all college conceived themselves 50 and 100 years ago. And the other ones are just, it's just tiresome There's never been such a uniformity as the imposition of diversity as the object of a college. And that's what's going on, right? And so this plague comes into the middle of all that, and the war came into the middle of an atmosphere of public opinion. And that meant that all of these things that they did in the war were understood to be unusual and regrettable and soon as possible to be ended. And that was Churchill's view, right? And that meant that he could get energetically about the war and constantly look forward to the day where we didn't have to live like this anymore.
And in the next Hillsdale Dialogue, we will talk about how Churchill communicated that, an example that could be studied wisely by everyone, how to arm yourself in honor and valor and communicate it as such. Be of good cheer. Be not afraid. That's the most often seen verse in the Bible. Be not afraid. I will be back next week, America, with Dr. Arnn, and on Monday with the latest news here on The Hugh Hewitt Show.